The envelope came on a Tuesday, tucked between a grocery store flyer and a credit card offer. It was ivory white, sealed with a dark red wax stamp that looked absurdly formal against the rest of the week's mail. Return address: Hannah M. Carter. Postmark: Charleston, South Carolina. Marissa hadn't heard that name in 8 years. She held the envelope like it might burn her fingers. It didn't make sense. Hannah was her mother's sister, her aunt, but the two of them hadn't spoken since Marissa left home at 19, with a suitcase full of anger and a vow never to return. She stared at it for a long time, then opened it with the kind of hesitation normally reserved for test results or apologies too late. Dear Marissa, your mother's health is declining faster than we expected. She doesn't know I'm writing to you, and I'm not asking you to forgive her, only to see her. I think you'll regret it if you don't. She's at the old house. Room on the end of the hall. Same way you left it. Come if you want, don't if you don't. But she's asking about you now. Hannah. Marissa folded the letter and sat very still. Her mother had never apologized for what happened, never called, never tried. Marissa had built her life in Seattle, far from the wide porches and slow sunsets of South Carolina. She was a librarian now. She paid rent on time. She kept everything tightly ordered. But something in her chest began to loosen and ache. She called out sick the next morning. By Friday, she was on a flight back to the coast she swore she'd never see again. The cab ride from Charleston Airport to the house took just under an hour, but Marissa felt every minute of it. As they passed moss-draped trees and peeling roadside churches, she stared out the window, watching a landscape she'd once known by heart. It had changed, of course. New gas stations, a closed school. But the air smelled the same warm, earthy, and faintly like jasmine. When they turned onto the familiar gravel road, her breath hitched. The house looked smaller. The wide wraparound porch sagged a little on the left side. The once blue shutters had faded to a washed-out gray. But the wind chime by the door still tinkled softly in the breeze, like it had been waiting for her. Aunt Hannah opened the door before she knocked. "Didn't think you'd come," she said. Marissa gave a tight nod. "I almost didn't. She's in her room." End of the hall. She stepped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath her like old bones. Everything looked frozen. The same faded floral wallpaper, the same picture frames, the same scent of lemon furniture polish and time gone stale. She walked past the living room where her mother once sat chain-smoking and correcting Marissa's posture, past the dining room where no one had laughed after 2007, past the old upright piano with 3 chipped keys and a silence that felt more permanent than dust. She paused outside the door at the end of the hallway, then knocked. No answer. She pushed it open slowly. The room was dim, the curtains drawn, a small fan whirred in the corner, and the light from the hallway stretched across the bed like a long arm reaching in. Her mother lay curled on her side, frail, smaller than Marissa remembered, tubes in her nose, a half-drunk cup of water on the nightstand. For a long moment, Marissa didn't move. Then her mother stirred. Her voice, dry and brittle, cracked the silence. "Am I dreaming? Or did you finally come home?" Marissa stepped into the room, one foot crossing a threshold she swore she never would. "I'm here," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Her mother's eyes blinked slowly. "Took you long enough. No apology. No welcome. Just that." But even so, Marissa sat down in the wooden chair by the bedand, didn't leave. Not yet. Not this time. The first night, they didn't say much. Marissa sat in the wooden chair, arms folded across her stomach, watching the slow rise and fall of her mother's chest. The room smelled of pills and hand lotion, and time ticked by on a loud, plastic clock nailed above the closet. Occasionally, Hannah would drift in, checking vitals, offering tea. Marissa never touched it. The next morning, her mother was awake when she came in. "You look like your father," she said. "No hello, no smile, I've heard. He had a hard mouth too. Always looked like he was halfway between a kiss and a curse." Marissa raised an eyebrow. "Wonder where I got that from." Her mother didn't respond, but her eyes flickered. They sat in silence again. At lunch, Hannah brought in soup and left without speaking. Her mother pushed the spoon away. "Still hate carrots," she muttered. "You still remember that?" Marissa asked, genuinely surprised. "I remember everything." The room shifted slightly, like a door left half open. "I was angry," Marissa said quietly after a long pause. "When I left." Her mother didn't look at her. "So was I." Marissa nodded. "You never tried to reach out. You made it pretty clear you didn't want me to. I wanted you to fight for me. I didn't know how. The silence that followed wasn't sharp, it was full, like they were both waiting for the same train to pass so they could speak without yelling over it. Marissa leaned back in the chair, eyes drifting to the bookshelf, still dusty, still full of poetry she'd once memorized just to get her mother's attention. "Do you ever read these anymore?" Her mother gave a faint smile. "Eyes are going. But I still remember the words. What's your favorite?" Her mother turned her head slowly. "Hope is the thing with feathers." Marissa didn't finish the line, she just nodded. Because for the first time in nearly 10 years, she understood. Her mother never stopped knowing the words. She just forgot how to say them out loud. That afternoon, Marissa wandered upstairs. Her old bedroom was just as she remembered, down to the faded pink curtains and the corkboard still holding up long yellowed notes. The bed creaked when she sat. A copy of The Secret Garden still sat on the nightstand, cover frayed from rereading. She ran her fingers along the spines of old books, the edge of the window frame, the seam in the floor where the wood never quite fit. It was like stepping into a life that had gone on pause the moment she left. In the closet, behind a dusty trunk of winter coats, she found it. A small cardboard box, no label, just sealed with a strip of floral tape her mom used for scrapbooks. She hesitated, then peeled it open. Inside were letters, all addressed to Marissa Carter, all written in the shaky, looping cursive of her mother. None of them had been mailed. The earliest was dated June 2009, the summer she left. The last one, 3 years ago. She sat on the floor and read. "I wanted to tell you about the garden blooming early this year. The azaleas remind me of the dress you hated in 5th grade. I kept it anyway. I didn't know how to be softer back then. I knew how to be strong and cold. That's what my mother taught me. It's what I thought love looked like. I'm sorry. Hannah says you got a job in Seattle. I bet you drink coffee now. Black, like I do. You always hated sugar when you were mad. I miss the sound of you walking down the hallway, angry or not. It meant I wasn't alone." Marissa stopped. Her throat burned. At the bottom of the box was a folded sheet of notebook paper. Old, crinkled. One of hers. It was a letter she'd written at 13. Full of rage and messy capital letters. "You don't see me. You don't want to. I'm not a poem you can quote. I'm a girl. I wish you'd hear me." Her mother had kept it. Not torn. Not marked. Just folded neatly, like something sacred. Downstairs, Marissa stood in the doorway of her mother's room, holding the letter. "You read this?" she asked. Her mother nodded from the bed. "Many times. Why didn't you throw it out?" I needed the reminder. "Of what?" Her mother turned, eyes tired but honest. "That you were brave, and I wasn't." The room went still. Marissa crossed to the chair again, the letter in her lap, the silence between them different, now less a wall, more a bridge. And for the first time since she returned, she felt something soften. Not forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of it. Marissa didn't plan to stay past Sunday. But Sunday came and went, and she hadn't booked a flight. Monday arrived, and she found herself making coffee in the same chipped mug her father used to drink from. She hadn't spoken his name yet, neither had her mother. The air around it still felt loaded. That changed when Aunt Hannah handed her a small envelope. "I found this in the attic last winter," she said. "Didn't know if you'd want it. Maybe now's the time." Inside was a photo. Old. Bent at the corners. Marissa blinked at it. Her father stood in the backyard, grinning, something rare, something almost jarring. He had his arms around a woman that wasn't her mother. And in the bottom corner, a note. "Spring 1999, M+L+G. Marissa turned it over. Nothing else. She didn't recognize the woman. But the date? That was the year everything shifted. The year her parents stopped speaking in full sentences. The year her mother's smile vanished like it had been packed away with the winter coats. She brought the photo to her mother's room without thinking. "Who is she?" she asked. Her mother squinted at the picture, then sighed. Long, low, heavy. "Her name was Lena," she said. "Were they?" Her mother nodded. "Briefly, before he came back, before he asked me to pretend it hadn't happened." Marissa felt the question form before she meant to ask it. "Did you love him?" Her mother's eyes filled, not with tears, but something older. Worn. "I loved the version of him that came before the war. Before he buried everything he didn't want us to see. And after?" Her mother hesitated. "After, I stayed. Because I loved you more than I hated him." Marissa looked down at the photo again. Something inside her cracked open, not from betrayal, but from clarity. Some truths didn't shatter. They simply rearranged what you thought you knew. That evening, rain began to fall soft, steady, the kind that crept into everything. Marissa sat on the porch, legs tucked under her, the photograph in her lap. It felt strange that one image could make her feel more connected to her father and more distant from him at the same time. For years she'd tried to box him in, the man who taught her to ride a bike but never asked about her college application, who sang old soul songs but left her mother crying in the kitchen more than once. Complicated didn't begin to cover it. Aunt Hannah brought out a blanket and handed her a cup of tea. "Your mom loved him," she said gently. But she loved herself enough not to leave when it got hard. That was her version of strength. You just didn't see it yet. Marissa nodded slowly. She didn't talk about him much. She didn't need to. He never really left the house. Later that night, Marissa found herself back in her childhood room. She opened an old journal, flipped through the pages until she found an entry written in shaky handwriting her own. Age 12. "Today, Dad yelled at Mom again. Then he told me to smile more. I smiled until my face hurt. I hope that's what he wanted." Her throat tightened. She picked up a pen and started a new page. Not for him. For her. His name was Robert Carter. He was my father. He was not a villain. He was not a saint. He was human. And so am I. Downstairs, her mother was awake. Marissa walked into the room, journal still in hand. "I wrote about him," she said quietly. Her mother looked at her over her glasses. "About your father?" "Yes." Her mother sat up slightly. "Did you say his name?" Marissa nodded. Her mother exhaled. "That's the first time I've heard you say it in 10 years. It felt necessary." They didn't speak after that. But her mother reached out and touched Marissa's hand, the first gesture of comfort they'd shared since before high school. The next morning, Marissa woke to sunlight pouring through the curtains and the smell of fresh bread baking downstairs. And she realized healing didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it entered like sunlight through lace. Quiet, gradual, unmistakable. They started with the hallway closet. Marissa hadn't meant to help. It began with a light bulb that needed replacing and ended with her pulling down boxes labeled winter and old papers in her mother's familiar loopy cursive. "Don't toss anything without asking," her mother warned from the doorway, blanket around her shoulders. "Wouldn't dream of it," Marissa said. Most of it was predictable. Old tax returns, Christmas decorations, brittle sweaters that smelled of cedar. But one drawer in the antique dresser wouldn't open all the way. "It's warped," her mother explained. "Has been since before you were born." Marissa tugged carefully, then firmly. The drawer gave way with a sharp creak. Inside was a bundle of envelopes tied with twine. The paper had yellowed at the edges, some stamps curling away from the corners. Marissa lifted one. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her father's. She glanced up. "Did you know these were here?" Her mother shook her head. "I thought I burned them." There was no bitterness in her voice, only something quieter. Regret, maybe. Or fatigue. Marissa untied the twine. Each letter was addressed to her mother. None had been opened. "Are you sure you want me to?" "I'm not reading them," her mother said flatly. "But you can." Back in her room, Marissa sat cross-legged on the bed and opened the first one. June 14, 2004. Anne. Today Marissa won her spelling bee. She looked so much like you when she smiled wide, almost defiant. I didn't know how to say I was proud without it sounding like a performance, so I just clapped too loudly and made her embarrassed. I think she liked it. I know we're not good at saying the soft things anymore, but if you're reading this, I want you to know I tried. Not always well, but I tried. R. Marissa read until her eyes blurred. Each letter was a breadcrumb trail of words he was never brave enough to say aloud. And though the man who wrote them was long gone, the words still reached her. They still mattered. Marissa waited until the evening. The rain had passed, leaving behind clean air and windows streaked with light. Her mother sat in her usual chair near the window, a blanket over her legs, a mug of chamomile untouched beside her. Marissa held the letters in her lap like fragile bones. "He wrote more than I expected," she said gently. Her mother didn't turn to her. "He always had words. He just didn't know where to put them. I think he meant to send them." "Maybe. I think he was afraid." Her mother's eyes stayed on the window. So was I. Marissa unfolded the first letter and read aloud. Just the part about the spelling bee. Just enough to draw the memory into the room without making it heavy. Her mother didn't interrupt. When the letter was finished, she finally spoke. "He was good once," she said. "Before life beat the softness out of him. Before he thought being a husband meant being right, and being a father meant never crying." Marissa looked down at the remaining letters. "There's one where he talks about the night I ran away." Her mother flinched, only slightly. That was the loudest night of our lives. He said he stayed in my room after I left. Just sat there. Said he found one of my drawings under the bed. I found it too, her mother said quietly. But I didn't know what to do with it. I folded it into my wallet and never opened it again. Why? Her mother looked at her, then really looked. Because it was of you and him. Holding hands, you were smiling. Marissa felt the ache rise again. Slow and sharp. I hated him for years, she admitted. But I think I hated him most for leaving me confused about how to feel. Her mother nodded. That's the hardest grief. The kind that doesn't come with clean lines. They sat in silence. Then her mother reached for one of the unopened letters. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the page. Her lips moved but made no sound. She didn't cry. But something in her broke beautifully. I think I'm ready to forgive him, she said softly. Marissa reached across the armrest, took her hand. Me too. Marissa walked to the post office on Wednesday. Not because she had a letter to send, but because the act felt grounding ordinary. The sidewalks were cracked, the magnolia trees fuller than she remembered. People nodded at her like they knew and didn't know her all at once. Inside, the line was short. 2 people. One of them was Mr. Halverson. He'd lived 2 doors down when Marissa was a kid. He used to sit on his porch every Sunday, smoking cigars and yelling at the radio when the Braves were losing. Now, he looked smaller. His beard had gone white, his hands curled slightly with age. He recognized her immediately. Well, I'll be, he said. Marissa Carter. She smiled. Hi, Mr. Halverson. Heard you came back. Hannah said your mom wasn't doing so hot. She's resting. We're doing better than I thought we could. He nodded slowly. Then, after a moment, said, You know, I haven't talked to my daughter in 6 years. Marissa blinked. I didn't know you had one. He chuckled. Most folks don't. She moved out west. San Diego. Said I didn't listen well. Said I didn't see her. Marissa's heart tugged. She right? She asked. He shrugged. Maybe. Probably. He looked down at the letter in his hand, then back at her. You think it's too late? Marissa didn't answer right away. She thought of the silence between her and her mother, the unopened letters, the nights they sat in the same room not saying what needed to be said. Then she said, If you're still asking, it's not too late. He nodded. Quiet. Good girl, he said. You were always a good girl. As he left, Marissa realized something she hadn't before. Coming home wasn't just about what you find. It's about what you return to others, too. That evening, Marissa sat at her mother's old writing desk. It was a relic from another time-dark wood, carved legs, the smell of ink still faint beneath the polish. Her mother once wrote grocery lists here. Her father had filled half the drawers with bills and scratch notes. Now it belonged to her. She pulled out a piece of thick, cream-colored stationery and a pen that still worked, surprisingly. And she began to write. Dear me, this isn't a list of regrets. And it's not a list of things I wish you had done differently. It's a letter to say, you survived. You left when it hurt. You came back when it hurt more. You sat in rooms that used to echo with silence and let them fill with your breath again. You learned your father was more than his mistakes, and so were you. You learned your mother loved you in the language she was taught, even if it was broken and clumsy. You learned that absence and love can live in the same house, sometimes in the same room. You came back not to fix them, but to find yourself. And you did. Not all at once, but enough. You are enough. Love, Marissa. She read it once, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer no envelope. The next morning, she tucked the drawer shut without a word, then joined her mother in the garden. They pulled weeds, potted herbs, argued about basil. The sky was wide, and the air smelled clean. For the first time in years, the space between them wasn't heavy. It was full. Full of unsaid things, and said things, and the gentle understanding that you can't rewrite the past but you can hold it with both hands and decide not to carry all of it forward. The suitcase lay open on the bed. It wasn't the same one she'd left with at 19, but it might as well have been. The contents were lighter, now fewer clothes, no sharp-edged defiance packed in between socks and paperbacks, just folded things. A book of poems, a jar of her mother's peach preserves, a letter she hadn't decided whether to mail. Her mother watched from the doorway. You sure you don't want to stay longer? She asked. Not pleading, just asking. Marissa smiled. I've stayed longer than I planned. Long enough? I think so. Her mother nodded. You'll call? I'll write. Old-fashioned, her mother said, but her voice was warm. I learned from the best. They didn't hug. Not right away. But her mother walked her to the door, slippers soft against the wooden floor, and stood in the sunlight like something waiting to be forgiven and, finally, was. "I never knew how to say it right," she said quietly. "You don't have to," Marissa replied. "We built something anyway." Her cab pulled up. She loaded the suitcase, paused with the door open. "I'll come back," she said. "I know." And with that, she left, not running, not aching to forget, just leaving, and promising to return. Seattle was gray when she landed. Not the kind of gray that swallows you whole, but the kind that softens edges, makes everything feel like it's wrapped in flannel and memory. Marissa pulled her coat tighter as she stepped out of the terminal, the air brisk against her skin. The apartment hadn't changed. Mail stacked in its usual corner. The dying succulent by the window still clinging to life. A tea stain on the counter she never bothered to scrub. But something in her had changed. She moved slower. Not from reluctance, but with intention. That first evening, she didn't unpack. Instead, she opened her laptop, pulled up a blank document, and titled it simply, "The Light Between Rooms." Then she started writing. Not a novel, not a memoir, something else. A series of small stories. About things people don't say. About the spaces between people. About a girl who hated the color of her childhood room but learned to love the sound of her mother's laugh again. About a man who never mailed his letters, and the daughter who read them anyway. She wrote for hours. At some point, the sun dipped behind the buildings, and the room went dark. But she didn't turn on the lights. She didn't need to, because somewhere inside her, after all the silence, after the long return, something was finally glowing. Not loudly, but enough,